I stood in the church in Bristol, England, staring at the front row where my parents' flowers rested like a final apology nobody could take back. The air smelled of candle wax and damp coats, and the soft music felt too polite for what had happened. People moved around me in slow waves, touching my shoulder, saying they were sorry, saying my parents were in a better place. I nodded because that's what you do when you can't find the right words, but inside I felt empty and loud at the same time. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, so I hid them under my black shawl and kept my eyes on the floor until the service ended. Outside, the sky was a dull gray, the kind that makes every building look heavier. The cars lined the street like they were waiting for permission to leave. My brother, Mark, stood near the steps talking to distant relatives as if he was hosting an event instead of burying our parents. He didn't cry. Not once. His wife, Lydia, kept shifting their baby on her hip, bouncing him in short, impatient moves. The baby was only 6 months old, round-cheeked and sleepy, unaware of the sharp tension in the air. I tried to focus on him because looking at a baby makes the world feel less cruel, even if only for a second. We all went back to my parents' house on Hawthorne Lane after the burial. That house had always smelled like tea and clean laundry, and the hallways still held the faint scent of my mother's rose hand cream. The living room was crowded with coats on chairs and half-finished cups on the coffee table. Someone had brought food nobody touched. The curtains were drawn even though it was only afternoon, and the dimness made the family photos look like memories behind glass. I walked past the framed picture of my father in his gardening gloves and felt my chest tighten so hard it was difficult to breathe. Mark didn't wait for the room to settle. He stood near the fireplace like he was about to give a speech, and Lydia planted herself on the sofa with the baby, her lips pressed into a thin, annoyed line. I was still crying, quietly, the kind of crying that leaks out even when you're trying to stop it. Mark turned his head toward me with a look that made me feel like I was being inconvenient. Then he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear, with no softness at all. "Stop crying," Mark snapped. "Lydia and the baby were kicked out of the house. We're going to sell this house." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My mind was slow, like it was moving through thick water. "Kicked out," I repeated, my voice small. "By who?" The words sounded strange in my mouth, as if they didn't belong in this day, in this room, in this grief. Lydia's eyes flashed toward me, and she adjusted the baby's blanket like she was fixing something messy. "Your parents didn't want us here," Lydia said. Her tone was sharp, like a door slamming. "They said Mark needed to stand on his own. They said the baby was too much noise." She tilted her chin, watching me as if she expected me to beg her forgiveness for a crime I didn't understand. People shifted around the room, pretending not to listen, but every ear was listening. My throat tightened. I wanted to argue, to say my parents would never speak about their grandchild that way, but grief makes you doubt even your strongest memories. Mark stepped forward and waved his hand toward the walls and the furniture like it was all already sold. "We'll get an agent," he said. "We'll split it. It's only fair. You can't just sit here crying like a child." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't wanted to see before. Hunger. Not hunger for food, but hunger for control, for money, for being the one who decides. Lydia stared at me too, her expression cold and confident, like she'd already won. The baby let out a soft sound, and she bounced him again. Harder this time, as if even his tiny needs annoyed her. I wiped my cheeks slowly with the back of my hand and forced my breathing to steady. My heart was beating fast, but my face became calm, almost quiet. Then I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a private one, the kind you make when you realize someone doesn't know the whole story. "Okay," I said softly, as if I agreed, as if I had nothing to fight for. Mark blinked at my answer. Lydia narrowed her eyes, suspicious now, because people like her don't trust calm. I picked up my coat from the chair by the door, slipped my arms into it, and walked out of the house without another word. The cold air hit my face like a slap, but it also cleared my head. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel, hands steady at last. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was the weak one, the easy one, the one who would fold. They had no idea about my secret home, miles away from Hawthorne Lane, and they knew nothing about the company I had built quietly, carefully, under a name they'd never heard. I started the engine, looked at the house one last time, and drove away. 7 hours later, everything they believed was about to crack. I drove away from Hawthorne Lane with my hands steady on the wheel, even though my heart still felt like it had been broken and stitched up the wrong way. The streets of Bristol blurred past, wet from a thin drizzle, and the traffic lights looked too bright against the gray sky. I didn't head to a friend's house. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't go anywhere my brother would guess. I took the motorway and let the city fall behind me, because I knew if I stayed close, I would turn back, and if I turned back, I would say things I couldn't take back. Grief already hurts enough without adding regret to it. After about an hour, the road opened into quieter places, rolling fields and small stone buildings. I turned off onto a narrow lane lined with tall trees, and the world suddenly went silent, as if someone had lowered the volume. A black gate stood at the end of the lane, simple and strong, with no name on it. My car slowed, a small sensor caught the plate number, and the gate slid open without a sound. I drove through, and the trees swallowed me up until the house came into view, sitting back from the road like it had nothing to prove. This house was outside Bath, and nobody in my family knew it existed. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful in a clean, calm way. Stone walls, wide windows, soft lights that made everything feel warm, even on a cold day. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish and fresh air. There were no old family fights stuck in the corners, no heavy silence like Hawthorne Lane. I set my coat on a chair, kicked off my shoes, and stood still for a long moment, letting the quiet settle around me like a blanket. In the kitchen, a folder lay neatly on the counter, where I always left it when I was traveling. It wasn't dramatic or secret-looking, just plain, with my name printed on a simple label, Elena Harper. I poured a glass of water and opened the folder, even though I already knew what was inside. Reports, contracts, bank statements, and schedules, parts of my life that didn't match the story Mark liked to tell about me. According to him, I was always between jobs, always finding myself, always too sensitive. I let him believe that because it kept me free. People don't watch you closely when they think you're failing. I walked into my study, switched on my laptop, and logged into the company portal. The screen showed a clean logo and a password box, nothing flashy. My company was called Harper and Wren, and it had started as an idea scribbled in an old notebook, then became late nights, careful planning, and quiet risk. We handled property management and small business services for clients who wanted privacy and order, and we did it well. I didn't chase attention. I chased stability. That's why nobody knew. That's why it grew. The numbers loaded, and I stared at them until my breathing slowed. Money doesn't fix grief, but it does fix certain problems, and Mark had just created a problem. The main account balance sat there like a calm answer. Enough to buy time, enough to buy space, enough to stop people from pushing me around. I didn't smile this time. I just felt clear. For years, I had kept my life separate from my family because their opinions felt like heavy hands on my shoulders. Now, that separation was going to protect me. My phone buzzed on the desk, then buzzed again and again, like an insect that wouldn't die. I picked it up and saw Mark's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring. Then Lydia's name appeared, and I let that ring too. Messages started coming in, one after another, piling up like dirty dishes. Some were from cousins asking if I was okay, and some were from people I barely remembered, suddenly interested in the house, suddenly interested in what happens next. Nobody asked how I was sleeping. Nobody asked if I'd eaten. They asked about walls and money. Then Lydia sent a message that made my stomach harden. "We need money." Oh, Mark. Don't act innocent. You always got their attention. I read it twice, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. I wasn't angry in a loud way. I was angry in a quiet way, the kind that makes you stop shaking and start thinking. Because Lydia wasn't just rude. She was confident. Confident enough to speak like the house was already sold and the money already counted. I set the phone down face up so I could watch it light up without touching it. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, the house stayed warm and steady. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a small key box, and checked what I already knew was there. Documents, spare keys, and a list of trusted contacts. One name sat at the top of my list in neat handwriting: Grace Whitmore, the solicitor my parents had used for years. I had never needed her for myself, not directly, but I knew she would tell me the truth without drama. I picked up my phone again and typed a short message to Grace. I need to see the will and any documents connected to my parents' house. As soon as possible. I didn't add emojis or extra words. This wasn't a friendly chat. This was business now, even if my heart still felt like it was in the ground with my parents. When I finally turned off the lights upstairs and lay in bed, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like a pause before something important. Mark and Lydia thought I had walked away because I was weak. They thought my smile meant surrender. They had no idea that while they were planning to sell a house, I was already stepping into a different room entirely, one where rules mattered, papers mattered, and lies didn't last. And somewhere inside me, under all the sorrow, a steady voice said, "Let them talk. Let them plan. Tomorrow you will answer with truth." I barely slept, but I woke before sunrise anyway. The quiet in my house outside Bath felt heavy. I made tea, checked my phone, and saw missed calls from Mark and Lydia. I didn't answer. I dressed in black, tied my hair back, and drove toward Bristol with the radio off. Grace Whitmore's office was above a small bookstore near the river in Bristol, England. The door had frosted glass and a brass handle worn smooth. Inside, the air smelled of paper and lemon cleaner. Grace stood to greet me. Silver hair, calm eyes. "Elena," she said, "I'm sorry about your parents." I nodded and sat down, my hands tight in my lap. She placed a thick envelope on the desk. "Your parents signed these months ago," she said. "There is a will, and there is a trust connected to the house on Hawthorne Lane." The word trust made my throat tighten. I opened the envelope and saw stamped pages with dates and signatures. "Mark says he's selling the house," I told her. "He brought an agent yesterday." Grace tapped a line with her pen. "He can talk," she said, "but he cannot sell." The house was placed into a trust last year to protect it from pressure, debt, or impulsive choices. "Who controls it?" I asked. Grace turned the page toward me. My name was printed there, Elena Harper, trustee. For a moment I forgot to breathe. I saw Mark telling me to stop crying, as if grief was a bad habit. I saw Lydia's hard stare. Then I looked back at the paper and felt my shoulders settle. Not joy. Not revenge. Just certainty. "There's also a letter," Grace said, sliding a smaller envelope across the desk. My fingers shook as I opened it. My mother's handwriting leaned slightly, the way it always did on cards. "Elena," she wrote, "we know you built your own life. We are proud. Keep your peace. Mark will push, and Lydia will use drama like a tool. Protect the house. Protect yourself." I folded the page and held it against my palm. Grace opened another file. "Your parents left you money directly," she said. Pound 250,000. The number didn't make me happy. It made me understand. They had given me options: legal help, repairs, security, or a clean exit from any trap my brother tried to set. As I stood to leave, Grace said, "If Mark argues, send him to me. The papers are clear." I thanked her and walked out into the cold air. I sat in my car and watched the river for a moment. I thought about my father's roses and my mother's clock on the mantel. I thought about Lydia's message, written like a demand. Then I made my decision. I would return to Hawthorne Lane with copies of the trust papers. I would speak once, clearly, and I would not argue. If Mark and Lydia wanted help, they could ask with respect. If they wanted to threaten me again, they would find the door locked, and the lock would be my name. I started the engine, drove toward Bath, but I wasn't going to hide. At home I printed 3 clean copies, one for Mark, one for Lydia, and one for the estate agent, Paul Denson, if he returned. I also wrote a short note with Grace's number. By late afternoon I had the folder in my bag, my voice practiced, and my tears dried. Tonight I would go back again. By the time I drove back to Hawthorne Lane, the winter light was already fading, turning the street into a strip of gray and gold. The house looked the same as it always had, red brick, white trim, the small garden out front, but it felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I sat in my car for a moment with the engine off, listening to the quiet. My parents were gone, but the house was still here, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something steady under my sadness. I picked up the folder from the passenger seat, took one deep breath, and walked to the door. Inside, voices echoed from the living room. Mark was talking too loudly, the way he does when he wants to sound sure of himself. I followed the sound, and there they were, Mark, Lydia, and the estate agent, Paul Denson, standing near the fireplace. Paul had a clipboard in his hand and a bright tie that didn't belong in a grieving house. Lydia sat stiffly on the sofa with the baby, who was chewing on a toy and staring at the ceiling like the ceiling was more honest than the adults. Mark turned when he saw me and forced a smile. "There you are," he said, like I had been late to a meeting. "We're sorting everything out. Paul's going to list the house. We'll be done quickly." Paul stepped forward with his professional grin. "Hello. I just need signatures from the heirs so we can begin the process," he said, already reaching for a pen. I didn't sit. I didn't take the pen. I walked to the coffee table, placed my folder down gently, and opened it with both hands like I was setting out something fragile. The room went quiet in that sharp way, the way it does when people sense the story is about to change. "Paul," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I'm glad you came, because this will save you time." Mark frowned. "What are you doing?" I slid the first document toward Paul. "Please read the first page," I said. "The house is in a trust." Paul's eyes moved over the words. His grin softened, then disappeared. He blinked, leaned closer, and read again. "This is very clear," he said slowly. "The property is held in trust. The trustee controls any sale." Mark snatched the paper from Paul's hand. His eyes scanned fast, then slowed, then stopped like he'd hit a wall. "This can't be real," he snapped, looking up at me. "Where did you get this?" "From Grace Whitmore," I said. "The solicitor Mum and Dad used." Lydia sat up straighter, clutching the baby tighter against her chest. "So, what, you're lying now? You're making fake papers?" Paul's voice turned careful, the way professionals sound when they're trying not to step into a family fire. "These appear legitimate," he said, pointing at the stamps and dates. "I can't proceed with a listing unless the trustee approves." Mark's face went red. "Who's the trustee?" he demanded, like the answer might save him. I turned the page and pushed it toward him. "Read the name," I said. He read it, and his mouth opened slightly. "Elena," he whispered, as if my name had become a problem. "You're the trustee?" "Yes," I said. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even the baby went quiet, staring at Mark's face like he could feel the tension. Lydia's eyes darted from me to Mark, searching for control and finding none. "So, you're going to throw us out?" Lydia said, her voice rising. "Is that what you want? To kick out a mother and her baby? After everything?" I kept my gaze on her, then briefly on the baby. "No," I said. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Mark took a step toward me. "Then give us money," he said. You have to help us. You always had it easier. You always got their attention. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply closed the folder and rested my hand on it. I will offer you a choice, I said. You can stay here quietly for 3 months while you find somewhere else to live and figure things out. No threats, no agents, no shouting. Or you can leave tonight, and I'll give you £5,000 to start over. Lydia stared at me like she didn't know whether to be furious or relieved. Mark scoffed, but his voice sounded weaker now. Where are you even getting money like that? He asked, suspicious and angry all at once. I held his gaze and answered with the truth, plain and simple. I have my own home, I said. And I have a company. Lydia blinked fast. What company? That's not the point, I said. The point is that you don't get to bully me anymore. Paul cleared his throat and took a step back toward the hallway. I think I should go, he said, already edging away. Yes, I told him. Thank you for coming. When the front door closed behind him, the room felt smaller. Mark looked at Lydia, and Lydia looked at Mark, and for the first time all day, they looked like two people who had gambled without knowing the rules. I picked up my coat from the chair and turned toward the doorway. I paused just once because there was one last thing I needed them to hear. If you were truly kicked out, I said, then I'm sorry your pride kept you from saying it kindly. But if you lied about Mom and Dad today, just to push me, then understand this. Lies always come with a cost. Then I walked out into the cold evening air, my breath visible in front of me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. Behind me, inside the house they thought they could sell, my mother's clock kept ticking, steady and patient, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment all along.